So, a question came up recently from one of my subscribers regarding grace and law again. So, I thought I'd make another video. This would be part 3 of the series that I started about 2 or 3 years ago on grace and law. And I like to emphasize that "and" because it's not grace versus law, but it's grace and law. And that is what gets most of us tripped up, is when we're trying to understand God's grace as a dichotomy, like it's either grace or law, or one or the other, and that's it. And of course this is in regard to salvation, because when we talk about grace, we're always thinking about salvation most of the time. And actually, let me say that again. When we talk about law, we're always thinking about salvation most of the time. That is, from a Protestant point of view, salvation is tied up in keeping the whole law. So, what we need to do is let go of salvation. Let go of it. Let go of the idea of salvation in regard to the law. The other point I need to make out is that a lot of people talk about how Jesus didn't change the law. They say, Jesus said, "I've come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." But then those same people will turn around and say, "Oh, but Jesus made it harder. He made it harder to keep the law because, the law says, thou shalt not commit adultery. But Jesus says, if anyone look on a woman lustfully, he's committed adultery with her in her heart." And he also uses the murder illustration. The law says, do not murder. But I say to you, if you just, have hatred toward your brother, if you call your brother a bad name, then it's the same as murdering him. And so people use this and say, see, Jesus made it harder to keep the law. And that is really actually could be no farther from the truth. I mean, it is, if you're going to say that Jesus didn't abolish the law, and this is the truth, folks, the law has not been abolished. All the laws of God are in effect to this day. Jesus didn't make it harder to keep the law. Jesus just showed the law for what it was. I mean, he was the Word made flesh. He is the light that came to shine on the darkness. And so, what he's saying here is, he's speaking that most of the time when he taught, he spoke in front of the Jewish leaders. And he did this to show their errors in interpretation of the law. I can guarantee you that true righteous Jews throughout the sages, the fathers, this is throughout the history of the ages, the sages would agree with what Jesus had to say. This wasn't any more true. This wasn't like some revelation. It was a revelation to them at the time. But what I'm saying is this: he didn't reveal anything new he's revealing what the laws were always were. You know, the laws of God are eternal. It's not just those letters written on a book. It's the eternal laws of God. It's the spirit of the law, if you would. And so, did Jesus make it harder to keep the laws? No, he didn't make anything harder. He didn't change anything. And when he says he comes to fulfill the law, he does just that. He fulfills the law. But that doesn't mean that once he fulfills it, that it's not applicable anymore. Okay? And then we get into this question of are non-Jewish people supposed to keep all of the laws? And then we get into this whole question of which laws should I be applying? So, but keep in mind that none of the laws of God have anything to do with salvation. So, whenever you start getting caught up in that regard and talking about works and faith, and you've lost your focus, and you need to just come back to the point that salvation is not about keeping the law. So let me ask the question again that everybody is always asking, and that is, should non-Jewish people be keeping all of the law? Should they be letting their beard grow out, for instance, not shaving the sides of their head? Should they be getting tattoos, or like avoiding that? Should non-Jewish people abstain from pork and shellfish? You see, the reason I bring up all these laws is because these are the ones that they're very hard to understand in regard to why you would do them as the right thing to do. The morality of not eating pork. This is what is hard to understand for a non-Jewish person. Okay, so we have all these laws that are very hard to distinguish the morality of. In other words, why should I shave the sides of my head when I don't even know why that's a good thing? I'm just saying this to make a point. I mean, most Jewish people, it's not a question at all. I mean, they're born under the law, and we'll talk about that term, being born under the law. They're born under the law, and so their heritage is to keep the entire law. And so the morality of keeping the law of, like, don't shave the sides of your head is basically God said it, and that settles it, And but some of the rabbis have speculated that, or actually they have recorded that a long time ago the heathen used to shave the sides of their heads, and therefore the nation of Israel, in order to keep themselves consecrated, in other words set apart, they would not shave the sides of their heads. They would do the exact opposite of what the heathen did. Okay, so that's not verifiable, it's something that one of the rabbis said, but I say this to make a point. There are a lot of these laws that we are so far removed from culturally, it's hard for us to understand the reason for keeping them. Let's talk about being born under the law. In Romans chapter 2, I believe, Paul says something to the effect of, how is it that these Gentiles who have not the law do naturally the things that are in the law? That they are basically a law unto themselves. What does Paul mean, have not the law? What does Paul mean when he says these Gentiles have not the law? Well, it means that they are not born under the law. They are of the nations. They are not like Israel, who have the burden and the yoke of carrying out all of the law. I'll get into that more. But the point of the matter is this. Let the Gentiles be Gentiles and let the Jews be Jews, is basically the point of the whole matter. When we talk about the spirit of the law, Paul is making a distinction here. The Gentiles who have not the law, that is, the legalistic aspects of the law, they're not born under the yoke of, I gotta grow my beard, I have to be kosher, I have to, etc., 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 everything in the law. No. As a matter of fact, when he says they have not the law, but they do naturally those things which are in the law, they are keeping the spirit of the law. And he's here making a distinction between the legalistic aspects of the law and the spirit of the law, which is an eternal reality of the Lord. Because the sages used to say that the Torah, pre-existed. The Torah is eternal. Torah, is a supernatural reality. You have the law that's written in the book, but the law is a reality behind the book. The spiritual law, the spirit of the law. So, enough said about that. Acts chapter 15. We see that there was a group of people requiring that Gentiles be circumcised. And what does Paul say? Why do you want to put this burden on the Gentiles that neither we nor our forefathers could keep? What is he referring to? Well, circumcision basically is a conversion to Judaism. These men were basically saying, if you don't become Jewish, you're not going to be saved. And that's the big no-no. You don't attach salvation to the legalistic aspects of the law. Because if you do that, you're going down the wrong path. No. Paul was saying, why do we want to lay this yoke of keeping the whole law on the Gentiles? And if you want verification of that, you look in the book of Galatians, and I think it's chapter 5 or 6. Paul says, don't you know that if you circumcise yourself, you are obligated to keep the entire law? And so we come back to the question, are Gentiles required to be circumcised? No. And why is that? Because Gentiles are not obligated to keep the entire law. Let's get back to this idea of the spiritual law, the spirit of the law. It's easy to discern spiritually, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. These are the things that are easy to understand. The things that are harder to understand are don't eat pork, don't eat shellfish, don't shave the sides of your head. And see, this is the difference between what is being Jewish and being a Gentile. If you're Jewish, it's your heritage, it's your culture, Now, is there anything keeping a Gentile from converting to Judaism? No. It's a personal choice. Is there anything keeping Gentiles from keeping kosher laws, such as not eating pork, not eating shellfish, letting the sides of your head, the hair grow? There's nothing keeping Gentiles from doing it, and but then again, they still are not bound to it. I think this is the whole point. The Gentiles are not bound by the yoke of keeping the entire law. No, this is a specific Jewish trait. Let me ask you this: Why are the Jews bound to keep the entire law? Well, it's because at Mount Sinai, their forefathers said to Moses, "We will keep the law." They basically, when the law was given to Moses, the nation of Israel said, "We will keep it." In so many words, we're gonna be bound to this law. And God has chosen the nation of Israel to be the keepers, to be the guardians of this law, to pass it on to their children, so that we could have it today, so that we could have the law today. And it's not going away. The law shall not pass away. Not one jot, not one tittle. It's still in effect. All of it is still in effect. Even the animal sacrificial system is in effect today. And this is a hard thing for people to realize, that if you're going to believe that the law is in effect, then the whole law is in effect. And that includes the animal sacrificial system. And, a lot of people are like, well, we don't need the animal sacrificial system anymore because Jesus' sacrifice replaced all that. Let's think about this for a second here. First of all, number one, keep bringing yourself back to the idea that the law has nothing to do with salvation. And if that is the case, then why would... See, let me make it very simple here. When you attach the sacrifice of Jesus to the animal sacrificial system of the law, then you are giving the law some sort of salvific or salvation, significance. In other words, it's almost like saying they needed the animal sacrificial system in order to be saved, which is actually a ridiculous notion. I mean, any righteous Jew from ages past to present will tell you they certainly are not saved by the sacrifice of animals. And if you think it's such a kind notion for our Messiah to offer himself in place of animals so that animals don't have to be sacrificed, let's just stop right there and think about all of the millions of animals that are slaughtered, every year, just for our food, for hamburgers, for chicken, Don't get me started on that, but coming back to the point. Now, the sacrificial system was definitely and is definitely a shadow of the ultimate sacrifice of our Messiah. And the sacrifice of the Messiah is most definitely a means to salvation. But was animal sacrifice in regard to salvation at all? No. And that's why it is not nullified. It is not abolished. As Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So the only reason that animal sacrifice is not occurring right now is because the temple is not standing on the Temple Mount. But I assure you that Orthodox Jews look forward to the day when they can rebuild the temple and re-establish the sacrificial system. Why? Because that's what's in the law. It's their duty and it's their obligation to keep the law. That is their mission as Jewish people. And to nullify that is to say that God is a liar, that he told them to keep this eternal covenant, but not anymore, or something to that effect. Now, mark my words, when the end of time comes, when the world to come does come, all these things will pass away. All these things are a shadow, and they will pass away. And only that which is eternal, which was underneath it all, the real meaning of it all, will remain. So real quick question. Are Gentiles obligated to hold up all of the law? Certainly they're not obligated to perform priestly duties and animal sacrifices, because those were designated specifically for the Levites. And unless you're a Levite and you're consecrated, you cannot be a priest. So some of the laws are very obvious. But I'm just saying this to drive a point home. And every time you start saying, you are obligated to grow your beard, you're obligated not to mix cheese and meat, you're obligated not to eat pork, you're obligated not to eat shellfish. Every time you do that, you are setting up a legalistic standard in regard to salvation. But you need to let go of salvation. Rest in the fact that God was gracious to all mankind, and realize that God chose the nation of Israel to bear the burden of the entire law. If you want to keep some aspects of those laws, or you want to convert to Judaism and keep as much of the law as you can, because remember, Paul said, why do you want to put on these Gentiles a yoke which neither we nor our fathers have ever been able to keep? In other words, we've never been able to keep the entire law. It's basically very simple. Let the Gentiles be Gentiles and the Jews be Jews. In other words, if you're sitting there converting Gentiles to Jews, then where are the Gentiles? If the prophets spoke about the Gentiles who would praise God, and the nations, the Gentiles who would come unto the Lord, then they need to remain Gentiles when they do so. And if you convert them from Gentile to Jew, then they're no longer the Gentiles that the prophets are referring to. So you have to let the nations be the nations, and you have to let Israel be Israel. The remnant of Israel, that is, the righteous ones. So I don't know what else I can say. This is a matter which will probably have to have another video because it's such a large topic to explain. But everyone, I wish you well. Keep seeking truth. God bless you all. Peace be with you all. And I look forward to my next video.